2 years ago, I made a video about how NetherRealm's attempts to get woke were horribly executed, with a large focus on Jax's ending. But why am I trudging up this 2-year-old debate now? Well, even now I still occasionally get comments making the same tired and inaccurate responses, and I feel that I may not have adequately conveyed the real issues this ending has back then, so I feel compelled to cover it again and try to do a better job of it. To recap, in Jax's ending, he defeats Kronika and seizes the Hourglass. With the vast, infinite possibilities open to him, Jax decides the thing he needs to put his focus on is the transatlantic slave trade. He takes a number of tries before finally getting it right, resulting in what we're to believe is a world where there is equality for all black people. Also, his wife is still alive. This is simultaneously too big and too small. Too big in that he's changing something that doesn't really relate to him in any meaningful way, the way, for example, Jackie or Johnny's endings do, and too small in that if he's not righting a personal wrong, he should be doing something much broader with this incredible power, but isn't. It also, obviously unintentionally, paints a negative picture of Jax for only changing something that relates to his race specifically and no others. There's no indication that he's removing other instances of slavery, bigotry, genocide, or war, which you'd think would take priority given that he's a lifelong soldier who has personally died in a war and doesn't want the same to befall his daughter. The issue with Jax's ending is not, and never has been, that he ends slavery. People who claim that's the issue are idiots, people who claim that that's the issue most people have with it are being disingenuous at best, and people who compare the controversy surrounding the ending to Gamergate need to get a fucking life. It's just an excuse used by the terminally unimaginative to disregard criticism of the things they like. The only reason anyone could dislike The Last of Us 2 is that they just hate women. The only reason anyone could have an issue with Black Panther is if they're a racist. No one could ever have a legitimate reason to dislike the things I like, so perfect is my opinion. The race focus isn't the issue on principle, it's that this particular character was used to do it when it's never been relevant to his personality or story, and nothing was done to make it so in this game. In fact, they took him in a direction where the concept they had for his ending simply does not work with his characterization. Look at Jax as he is characterized in the story. He is a highly protective father, which is only exacerbated by the recent passing of his wife. Jackie is all the family he has left, so being unable to get in touch with her during the time merger and feeling powerless to help his baby girl takes a heavy toll on him. So when Kronika appears before him and offers him the power to protect his daughter and a better life for his family in the new era, he feels like the only choice he has is to agree. He goes to a bad place in his grief, which only builds on his PTSD from his time as a Revenant. Fortunately, he becomes repentant and switches sides to fight alongside his daughter and the other heroes to bring Kronika down. But whatever he does, all of it is motivated by his desire to keep his daughter safe. Then you go to his arcade ending, where he's all of a sudden concerned about historical slavery that no longer exists and feels compelled to put a stop to it. Not only is this incredibly dangerous and out of character for reasons I'll get to in a second, but it also comes out of nowhere. There are 2 pre-fight intros where he references slavery.
Why doubt the Elder Gods?
Poverty, slavery, war.
You were 20 years a Revenant.
In other words, Shinnok's slave.
And let's just ignore the fact that Jax was a Revenant for 2 years, not 20, because really? That's it? That's all the setup we're getting? He doesn't even open his ending by saying, I had the opportunity to make things better for Jackie, and as I thought about all the ways I could do that, I realized that racism would always be a problem, or something to that effect. He just jumps from, my daughter is all that matters, to my people, with no build-up, no in-between, nothing. It's such a bizarre direction to take the character, and the only connection between this character and this motivation is, well, that is black. Jax is so overprotective of Jackie to the point of it being his dramatic flaw that he simply would not do something this risky. Let's move over to Jackie's ending, where she alters the massacre scene from 2011 so that Jax beats Sindel and doesn't die. As a result, he never becomes a Revenant, never goes into recovery after his restoration, never meets Vera, and never has Jackie, who is then erased from history. This means that one slip-up could erase Jax as well. And considering that Jackie is dusted from altering one ultimately insignificant event from 30 years ago, there's no way in hell that Jax would risk erasing himself, Vera, or Jackie by altering events from 500 years ago that have a direct impact on the existence of every black person living in the Western world to this very day. Even if Jax somehow managed to make sure every single one of those affected ended up with the same people at the same time as they originally did, working around the mass displacement of black Africans he is liberating, all it could take is one different sperm or egg cell or different life experience in Africa rather than where they originally ended up to produce an entirely different person, thereby wiping out out every single descendant they ever had. No matter how confident he is that he has memorized every single aspect of these people's lives and can adequately guide their lives to prevent the erasures, he simply would not risk it. But, of course, then you get the dumbasses who come into the comments, call you a racist for having any sort of issue with Jax's ending, say you're only mad that he erased slavery, and then say that any black person in that scenario would do the same. Of course, the irony that they accuse the person who takes issue with Jax's personality being ignored and his entire character being defined by his race of racism, while also themselves boiling Jax's entire character down to his race, is entirely lost on these idiots. This franchise really does attract the fucking worst people this side of the Smash community. And again, the race focus isn't a bad thing by itself, it's just that Jax was the wrong character to explore it with. There are 3 other characters that would suit this focus better. First is Baraka. He is part of a race that historically has effectively been slaves to the monarchy, and now that his people have gotten a better deal under Kitana, maybe that's gotten him thinking about his race's history and makes him want to make it so they've always been viewed as equals. But you might say that the message behind Jax's ending would be lost if the focus was on a fictional race, whatever that message was intended to be. Okay, how about Nightwolf then? Nightwolf's race has always been an important aspect of his character, from his aesthetic to his abilities to his storyline. His ending in his debut game was about the native people getting their lands back from the US, so there's some precedent for it. But that's not slavery, that's not the real hard-hitting racism that MK suddenly needs to address for some reason. Then what about Geras? Geras is a literal black slave who exists only to serve a white woman. He has a victory pose where he takes a knee before his white mistress, who places a hand on his head like a dog. He's defeated by being buried in chains on a boat, then dragged off the edge into the ocean. Okay, I'm being comedically hyperbolic with that last one, but it's true that Jax's life hasn't really been negatively affected by slavery as far as we've ever been shown, beyond the unrelated 2 years he spent as a slave, which he doesn't even bring up in either the story or this ending. Geras, on the other hand, is literally a black slave currently. He's the one who should have been given the slavery-focused ending, not Jax. Make him realise what he truly is, as his own views and morals can no longer be suppressed to do the Mad Titan's bidding, leading to his betrayal and seizing of the hourglass. He then looks through great injustices to erase, finding a sense of kinship with these slaves. What he chooses to do from here doesn't really matter. What does matter is that the ending that addresses this dark part of human history is given to the character who tangibly feels the effects of it for himself, as opposed to the aftershocks of it, if you will. And ideally, acknowledges that other instances of slavery have and do exist, and should also be erased so as not to make our hero look biased.
Speaking of looking biased,
how did you get in my house?
it's important to highlight how strange this ending is compared to the other characters in MK11. As virtuous as it may sound, just because Liu Kang is Chinese, that doesn't mean it would absolutely make sense for him to go back in time and change the industrialization of China. Up until MK11, the series has had very little to say about the topic of minorities. I mean, the strongest military force on Earth is being helmed by a black man and woman, and the people tasked with saving the world every 50 years are Chinese warrior monks. No one in-universe seems to have a problem with these facts because in the face of otherworldly threats, everyone is human. The original runs for both Star Trek and G.I. Joe were perfect templates for this, and thus it's very easy to identify aspects of the lore that just simply do not belong there. As the target demographic for this decision, I am well within my right to roll up a newspaper and smack whoever wrote this on the nose. Bad! We do that outside, not inside. But really, the most egregious part about this ending is that it's just boring. It lacks the impact and sacrifice the other endings have. Jax just does what he wants, and it's portrayed as being consequence-free. He doesn't dedicate his life to righting the wrongs of history, undergo a significant change in his life, or pay a heavy price for his happiness. The multiple attempts where he fails are shown to be minor inconveniences that he shrugs off on his way to his true goal. This ending could have been great if we were actually shown those failures and saw how each one affected his psyche, a la Steins Gate. Jax consistently hitting the reset button on all of creation because he can't be with his wife and daughter, trying to find that perfect timeline where slavery was prevented and he and his family not only get to exist but be together. From there we could have had a montage of Jax's failed outcomes until he finally reaches what he wanted, but his experiences with the multiple jumps have changed him, maybe even broken him. Not the best setup for this specific character, but a much better idea than his actual ending. Because in spite of the triumphant tone, the ending sounds a lot more psychotic when you actually think about the context. Jax is basically treating his wife and daughter like his personal happiness lab rats, completely unfazed by what we're led to believe, based on other endings, is a spiritually draining experience. I mean, even Geras, a golem with millennia of life experiences, basically kills himself because the job's too demanding. Jax is just a normal guy, shown to be very emotionally vulnerable. The ending was basically set up to be something complex, but it just ends up being completely disengaging. This ending is ultimately infuriating because it wastes the attempt to justify the changes to Jax's character over the course of the reboot era. Instead, we got something that's designed to piss off fans and pander to idiots. I don't know why so many devs at NetherRealm think that Mortal Kombat of all franchises is a perfect platform to virtue signal, because every attempt feels a lot more patronizing than it does endearing, and we all know what should happen to brands that try to get hip with the kids. Then again, these are the same developers who keep touting that Jade is quote-unquote black, despite the fact that they keep giving her naturally straight hair, South Asian attire, Oriental hairstyles, and have the voice actress put on a British accent. Oh yeah, and let's not forget, she's an alien. The point I'm getting at is that this lesson's probably not going to get learned anytime soon.
Alright, that's enough out of you. One common defense I've seen for the ending is that it's not canon. This is an argument people use for inconsistencies in pre-fight dialogue as well. Just because it's not necessarily canon doesn't mean it shouldn't line up with what is canon. Even non-canon material can be used to flesh out a character or a world by showing how characters would act in situations they haven't canonically found themselves in. Just because Jax didn't obtain the hourglass due to being erased with everyone else by Kronika doesn't mean the ending that shows him in that situation should go in a completely different direction than what makes sense for the character. Because if it doesn't line up with the canonical character, then what the fuck is the point? Who gives a shit what some alternate version of Jax would do with the hourglass? That's not the version of Jax we care about. It's this version of Jax who appears in the story. What he would do with the hourglass is what interests us, not this hypothetical alternate timeline version of Jax that we've never seen before. Jax, as he is written in MK11's canonical material, is too overprotective of his daughter to do anything that could risk erasing her from reality. Therefore, this ending simply does not fit. But why did this ending in particular get so much attention? Are there not other endings that contradict the established characters? Arguably sure. So why is this the one that got so much focus? I mean, there have been multiple endings across the series that depict all female fighting forces being established, and God knows depiction of gender is just as contentious a talking point as depiction of race is nowadays. Is it because all gamers TM are racist? Is it because Gamergate is the Emperor Palpatine of video games that is secretly behind all evils in the industry forever? No, people who think those things are in dire need of psychiatric help. I'd say part of it is the instinct certain people have to defend things that are progressive on a surface level without looking deeper to see how well it achieves this progressive goal. After all, we don't look at bad movies and say, well, the director's intent was to make a good movie and he did his best, so the actual quality doesn't matter. The quality of the end product matters, ultimately more so than the intent behind it. If we assume NetherRealm really did want this positive, progressive message about race relations, I can't say they did a particularly good job of it. For one, there isn't a message behind Jax using magic to fix a real-world problem, which isn't an issue in and of itself, but I can't really view this as NetherRealm having a point to make. It seems like they just wanted a character to end slavery, be that to look progressive, just because they thought it was a neat idea, or because an ending about his family would be too similar to Jackie in the Cages. But again, I must stress that just because he's black doesn't mean his race is his primary concern. Before that, he's a soldier, and before that, he's a father. That's where his focus should be. If that's too similar to the Cages, then change some of theirs into something else related to their characters. Maybe Johnny turns all the bad stuff into fictional events with the villains now existing only in fiction, while Jax gets to save his wife and daughter. Or at the very least focus on the soldier thing, which has been part of his character since his debut back in 1993, and have him prevent numerous wars, war crimes, and other such atrocities. Stuff relevant to his occupation, a thing that has been an active part of his character's story since the beginning. Some fans have become far too eager to defend the increasingly poor handling of MK's world and characters by NetherRealm over the last decade. If you think Jax's MK11 ending fits his character, then please go back, observe his depiction in the story mode, and reevaluate your stance, because I seriously do not see how anyone could look at one of MK's most enduring characters and say that boiling him down to black man is in any way accurate to his characterization.
Well, good timing, Raiden. The fighting's over, girlfriend.
I'd like to thank Drake for agreeing to provide his take on the matter, even if he did break into my house to do so.
Hey, if you didn't want me to break in, then you shouldn't have left your bolt cutters at the hardware store for $33.33. By the way, you owe me $34.
Eat my ass. If you liked this video, why not subscribe to me and Drake and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then you're a racist, because that's how that works apparently. Obviously, today's recommended content is Drake stuff. He's a cool guy and I want more people to view his stuff so we can bully him into making more.